Welcome back to our next episode of What's Up, Prof. Good day, Walter.
Good day.
How are you doing?
I'm surviving.
Yeah, it seems like a long time that I saw you last.
Well, yes, we do this once a week, don't we?
Will you open up for us with a word of prayer, please?
I think we will need it.
Yes.
Our loving Heavenly Father, we are living in such momentous times. And without you, we do not have a hope. But the great hope that we have is centered on you. And therefore I pray, Lord, that you will enlighten us with your Spirit and protect us with your angels. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. So today, let's talk about what's happening in the world again.
Yes, I think it's time that we go there. I think it was necessary that we give a very clear biblical outline as to what constitutes Babylon. And I think the talks that we had on the doctrines of the serpent give us the background so that we know who is teaching the serpent theology and who has been identified in Scripture as the great anti-power against Jesus Christ, masquerading as an angel of light.
Yes.
Apparently for him, but negating all of his teachings and the plan of salvation. And where are we heading? We're heading for a final conflict. A conflict of such an enormous scale that the world has never seen anything like it.
Yes.
And the events are happening so rapidly around us that once we've got this basis, we have to go back to where we're now in the stream of time, and then we can look again at some of the details and go back to where are we now in the stream of time. So, yes.
And this will continue like this up until the end.
Up until the end. So we must get the message out.
Yes, so this that we're going to be dealing with today is also linking on to where you've given us a basis to work from with the doctrine of the serpent.
But we must always make sure that we have the right filters in place. And the filter is the Word of God, with the assistance that we have, fortunately, of the Spirit of prophecy, which has to be in harmony with the Word of God. And when we apply that filter, then we know that we are working with the prophetic scenario and not with wild speculations.
Yes.
It's the filter that's important.
Correct. And then also important is what is our position in this whole scenario?
Yeah, where do we stand? What do we do? What is our role?
When do we get involved?
Yes.
When do we stand back and look as observers?
Now, what does a sower do? Doesn't he sow seed?
Yes.
And then does he go and pluck up the plant? Or does he wait patiently for the seed to germinate and to grow?
Yes.
So we can do the sowing, but we cannot do the growing. That's something that takes a special power that is not ours to give. So let's look at some of these issues. We've titled this one, North versus South. But there could be many titles and subtitles. I'm sure you will think of many.
Yes.
And put them in the links. But why are we talking about North versus South? Because this is the final battle as described in the book of Daniel. And then we have to apply it to the times we are living in. So this is actually an ongoing process. Every few months you must be able to give a lecture on Daniel, because it changes as we go along. Not the information, but the developments continue to change. In Jeremiah chapter 6 verse 16 we read, "Thus says the Lord, stand ye in the ways, and see, and ask for the old paths. Where is the good way, and walk therein? And you shall find rest for your souls." It's beautiful.
Yes.
But they said, we will not walk therein.
Sad.
That is the history of humanity. God gave us the path of salvation. God gave us all the criteria. And he said, choose that path. It's the path of life. And humanity says, we will not walk therein. But who's Jeremiah talking to here?
The church.
He's talking to God's people. And what do God's people say?
We will not walk therein.
We will not walk therein. Do you think it's changed and we've become better, or are we still exactly the same?
Like Solomon said, there's nothing new under the sun.
There's nothing new under the sun. So this is a very sad statement. But many will choose the broad way. But thank God, not all. In 9 Testimonies we read, Satan is a diligent Bible student. So what should we be?
Even more diligent Bible students.
Yes. He knows that his time is short. And he seeks at every point to counterwork the work of the Lord upon this earth. Whenever you do something for God, can you expect opposition?
Yes, 100%.
It's already a criteria with us. If we don't get it, we ask ourselves, what did we do
wrong?
It is impossible to give any idea of the experience of the people of God who shall be alive upon the earth when the celestial glory and a repetition of the persecutions of the past are blended. That's an amazing statement.
Yes.
So what glory will be blended with persecution? Cannot be the persecution, cannot be the glory of God.
It must be a false one.
It must be a false glory that is blended with persecution.
Yeah. And it's a celestial glory. So
the Bible tells us that Satan will deceive the very elect, even fire coming down from heaven. And with this powerful movement whereby he deceives humanity, he will link it to persecution and try and eradicate God's people from the face of the earth. This is a very fascinating thing, and there will be a terrible experience for God's people. They will walk in the light proceeding from the throne of God. This is now God's people. By means of the angels, there will be constant communication between heaven and earth. And Satan, surrounded by evil angels and claiming to be God, will work miracles of all kinds to deceive, if possible, the very elect. God's people will not find their safety in working miracles. Why not? Because Satan's doing it,
yes.
Right? Yeah, how will you distinguish between the one or between the other? So, what is the weapon that God's people have?
The Word.
The Word. Truth. It is written.
Yeah.
God's people will not find their safety in working miracles, for Satan will counterfeit the miracles that will be wrought. God's tried and tested people will find their power in the signs spoken of in Exodus 31:12-18. We'll have to look at that, right? Yes. They are to take their stand on the living word. It is written. This is the only foundation upon which they can stand securely. So it's very imperative for the devil to undermine the authority of the Word of God. And we've dealt with that in some of our discussions. Mm-hmm. And how important it is that we stick to what the Word says. This is the only foundation upon which they can stand securely. Those who have broken their covenant with God will in that day be without God and without hope.
And it's important, if you take this whole thing in context, where it begins. Satan is a diligent Bible student. So the things that he's going to do, if you're not grounded in the Word, it's going to look biblical to you. That the things
he's
that he's
going to quote the Bible. Didn't he come to Jesus quoting the Bible? Mm-hmm. Yes, but he takes it out of context and he twists it. So let's look at those verses in Exodus. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak thou also unto the children of Israel, saying, Verily my Sabbaths you shall keep, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I am the Lord that does sanctify you. So the important point here is that if you acknowledge the Sabbath, you are acknowledging the God that sanctifies you. So where do you get your salvation from? Where do you get your direction from as to how you should walk?
From Him.
From Him. So not from someone else.
No.
Not from someone who's following the doctrines of the serpent.
No.
Obviously not, right? So in other words, the Sabbath becomes a sign of acknowledgement that you accept the authority and the guidance of the Lord. You shall keep the Sabbaths, therefore, for it is holy unto you. Every one that defileth it shall surely be put to death. Now that was a type, right? God was working here as a theocracy. In other words, everybody who doesn't acknowledge that God is the one who is the one with authority will eventually suffer the consequence of separation by their own refusal.
Yes.
Not because God is vindictive.
No. Every single person that will be lost will have only what he has chosen.
Yes, absolutely. For whoever doeth any work therein, that soul shall be cut off from amongst his people. Now what does that mean? It means being engaged in your own works to try and save yourself. You have to rest in the completed work of God. You still had to eat. You still had to take your ox to the drinking. You had to do those things. 6 days may work be done, but in the seventh is the Sabbath of rest, holy to the Lord. Whosoever doeth any work on the Sabbath, he shall surely be put to death. Wherefore the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, to observe the Sabbath throughout their generations, for a perpetual covenant. So if it is the sign that God is the one that sanctifies it, can I remove it?
No.
Not possible, right? It is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens, the earth, and on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed. And we discussed that. This is a very complicated thing for the people living in this age of evolutionary thinking. You have to actually believe what the word says there.
Yes.
That God created it in 6 days. Otherwise the Sabbath becomes meaningless.
Correct.
So you're already at loggerheads with the scientific fraternity. And he gave unto Moses, when he had made an end of communing with him upon Mount Sinai, 2 tables of testimony, tables of stone written with the finger of God. How many commandments were on those tables?
10.
10. Not 9,
No.
not 7, not 8, 10. So God's people must keep all 10.
If you link these Bible verses to the the statement that we read earlier, why was this read? To show how important it will be in the end time deception that the devil will bring towards the earth.
It must be part of the deception. I like this statement by Martin Luther, and it sounds very harsh, but in the light of what we just discussed in the previous ones, the doctrine of the serpent, they are actually very powerful. He wrote, if you do not contend with your whole heart against the impious government of the Pope, you cannot be saved. Now that sounds very harsh, because there are many, many good Christians in the Roman Catholic system. People who really love the Lord, who do not understand. I mean, I was a Catholic. I didn't understand the fullness of their doctrine, what it actually meant, that it was so totally contrary to the Bible. And I believe that there are many within the church that don't understand that either. And if they should see it, they would be devastated. Whoever takes delight in the religion and worship of popery will be eternally lost in the world to come, because it is totally contrary to what the Bible teaches, right? If you reject it, popery, You must expect to incur every kind of danger, even to lose your lives. But it is far better to be exposed to such perils in this world than to keep silence. So long as I live, I will denounce to my brethren the sore and plague of Babylon, for fear that many who are with us should fall back like the rest into the bottomless pit. That's almost like a prediction. And we discussed that. And we said that if you align yourselves with Babylon, which at that stage, Martin Luther's stage, was the papacy and the dragon. But it's almost like a prediction that some will fall back and join the system again. And that's the sad part. Babylon has fallen. It was fallen. It fell again. There was another component that was added. Protestantism in the ecumenical movement, acknowledging this power, which Martin Luther said that you have to contend with. If you don't, you're on the wrong side.
Yeah.
You will be confronted.
Yes.
Could it affect our people? Could even some within our own church fall back and find them not as reprehensible as God stated in His Bible?
Unfortunately, yes.
I think it could happen. So let's have a look at the time of the end, because we want to look at the events that are happening in the world today.
Yes.
So we need some clarity. And again, we have to apply the filter, and the filter is the Word of God.
Yes.
Daniel 11, verse 40. And at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him. At whom? At the king of the north, right?
Yes.
And the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen and with many ships.
And this king of the north shall come against him is then the king of the south.
Yes.
Because I've also heard some people say that him is a separate.
No. He comes against the king of the south. This is the battle between north and south.
Yes.
So we have to define the battle between north and south. We have to define the king of the south, and we have to define the king of the north. And there is a battle going on between the two of them. And he will come against the king of the south with a whirlwind. Now, whenever the Bible talks about a whirlwind, it signifies war. You can read all the parallel texts in Jeremiah. We're not going to go into all of them. But a whirlwind is coming, and it's coming out of the north. And it's Babylon, it's Nebuchadnezzar who's coming. And chariots and horsemen is also a symbol of war. And with many ships, and ships is a symbol of the economy. So this will be a war that can be a physical war, can be a spiritual war, and it can be an economic war, and it can be all of the above. And he, this is the king of the north, shall also enter into the glorious land. That's God's people. Now, people want to literalize this.
Yes.
I want to say this is a literal battle between northern forces and southern forces against Israel. No. We are past the type. We are living in the antitype. What was on a local scale in the type becomes universal in the antitype. So the king of the north in the time of Jeremiah was the king of Babylon. Daniel also defines this in this prophecy. And Daniel and Jeremiah were virtually contemporaries. Yes. Daniel actually studied the words of Jeremiah. Yes. Now, what is happening here? So the king of the north was the king of Babylon. And the king of the south was Egypt.
Yeah.
And we have the conditions here. The king of the north will overrun the king of the south. But the king of the south will push at him. Did it happen historically?
Yes.
Yes. Pharaoh Necho came up and he tried to overthrow the Babylonian system. And the king of the north whacked him. And he destroyed him, basically, with military power. And the economy. He took over the economy of the world. And he shall enter into the countries and shall overflow and pass over. So he will enter many countries. Now the literal king of the north conquered the then time eastern countries and Asia.
Yes.
But the antitypical king will control every single country in the world. And he will even enter the glorious land, God's people. And many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hand. That was an interesting number of countries, which we cannot compare to countries today.
Yes,
we can only look at them
in an
antitype.
Yes.
Yeah. Edom, Moab, and the chief children of Ammon. So it's the Edomites, the Moabites, and the Ammonites will escape. Now, who were they? Well, the Edomites were the descendants of Esau.
Yeah.
So they were part and parcel of God's family, but they'd chosen another path, right?
Yes.
And Esau intermarried with the Ishmaelites. Correct?
Yes.
So we know who they are. So in today's context, we could say that the religion of the Middle East constitutes Edomites, the Moabites, and the Ammonites. Now, these were also descendants of the Abraham family,
Abraham.
Lot. So these were, in a modern context, sister churches. And it's interesting that when the children of Israel were about to enter into the promised land, it was the Moabites and the Ammonites with their short little mini dresses that enticed them towards Baal worship.
Yes.
So what are we dealing with here? We're dealing with the religious systems and the peoples belonging to the religious systems that are actually the descendants of the Edomites, the Moabites, and the children of Ammon. So we're dealing with Islam, we're dealing with the sister churches of Israel today. Who are they? That's Protestantism.
Yes.
And everybody who calls himself a Christian. So some of them will escape. So they're now entrapped by the king of the north, but they will escape. So those are the children that are in Babylon.
Yes.
That have to come out of Babylon. So it's a call to the religious world out there. Make a choice. Come out.
Yeah. It links on to Revelation.
And the king of the north, the king of Babylon,
Yes.
who is the king of Babylon today? It's the papacy.
Yes.
There can be no doubt about that. Verse 42, and he shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. So this king of the north becomes a universal power, and his special antagonism in this scenario is the king of the south.
Yeah.
Now, who was the king of the south? It was Egypt, right?
Yes.
And Pharaoh was the one who said, who is the Lord that I should obey his voice? I do not know him. I will not obey him.
Yes.
Do we have people today who say, who cares?
Who's God?
I don't know. Who's he? Why should he have anything to say in my life? I don't acknowledge him. Do we have people like that?
Yes.
Okay. And he shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver and over all the precious things of Egypt. And the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his step. Well, these are fascinating verses. So we have this contest or this battle between two ideologies. The king of the north ideology, which is religio-political, and we have the king of the south, which is secular. Who is the Lord that I should obey him? I do not know him. I don't care what he says. I'm going to do my own thing. And those will be in apparent conflict, but the king of the north will overcome them, right?
Yes.
And the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his step. Now, when you go back into history, the Ethiopians were also reached by the gospel. There was the man that Philip baptized, yes. Remember?
The eunuch.
And in other words, the whole world in its religious systems will actually be in harmony with this king of the north. So the king of the north must have a religion which accommodates virtually everything. Now, the Ethiopians, who are they, would they be today? They are the symbols of Africa, right?
Yes.
So, will there be conflicts which introduce even the race issue in the times that we are living in? And how does this battle unfold? Verse 44, but tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy and utterly to make away many. There's one power that bothers him. I mean, he's in control of everything, right? He's got all the countries overrun. He's got Egypt overpowered in the end. But there's one thing that bothers him, and this is tidings out of the east and out of the north. Now, what are tidings?
News.
News. It doesn't say a mighty army out of the east or the north. No. It says news. Information.
Information, yes.
Information from the east and from the north. Now, when we think about that, then we have to ask ourselves, what could bother the king of the north? If we know who the king of the north is, it's the papacy. Yes. What should bother him now? Tidings out of the east and out of the north. Now, the Bible says that Jesus Christ will be coming again, right? Mm-hmm. From what direction will he be coming?
From the east.
Aha. Who is this who's coming from the east? The old prophets, right? So, the news, the tidings that something is going to happen from the east. Who brings that message?
The Adventists, Seventh-day Adventists.
They are saying the king will come from the east.
Yes.
And he will destroy the kingdom of Babylon. Now, would that upset the king of the north?
Yes.
And why the north? Because he's from the north.
Yes.
But is there a higher north than he is?
The true king.
There's a true king. And the throne of God is in the north. So in other words, those who are preaching the end time message of the coming of Christ and worship the true God of the north, worship him who made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and the springs of water, they are a problem to him.
Yes.
And so he develops a great fury against them. And he wants to destroy them and remove them off the face of the earth. So, are we going to have a conflict?
Definitely.
Okay. And he shall plant the tabernacle of his palace between the seas. This is now the King James Version. In the glorious holy mountain. Yet, in spite of it, in other words, he shall come to his end and none shall help him. Now, this is rather scary. When we go to the newer translations, it looks a little bit different. Mm-hmm. It says in the NIV, he will pitch his royal tents between the seas at the beautiful holy mountain. So he's not going in.
Yes.
Yet he will come to his end and no one will help him. Or the New King James, and he shall plant the tents of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain. So he's also not in.
It's between.
But the King James says, in. What does that mean?
That he will be infiltrating the
even,
church.
Even God's people. He will be infiltrating God's people. Now, does that mean that God's people then become Babylon?
No.
But it means that there are Babylonians in God's people,
exactly.
amongst God's people.
Correct.
Does that sort of equate with wheats and tares and things like that? Yes. So we can expect...
I just want, sorry for interrupting. Just...
That's your job.
Sorry. Just re-emphasize what you've just said. That does not mean that the church is Babylon. It means that there's Babylonians in the church.
All right, now we can go Babylonian hunting in the church.
Exactly.
And we'll be kept very busy.
Yes.
Not our job.
No.
Our job is to preach the three angels' message. And if we hear Babylonian doctrine within the church, our job is to expose it as Babylonian. Because I don't know, the one preaching Babylonian doctrine, is he a Babylonian or is he influenced by the Babylonians? Yes. And if he is just influenced by the Babylonians, then he can be corrected.
Yes.
But if he is a Babylonian, well, even then he can be converted, right?
Correct.
So our job is not to attack certain individuals in the church, but our job is to expose error.
Correct.
And the choices that people make as a consequence is their choice. So preach the truth. Let the truth do the cutting. We must not become the ones wielding the axe. Yes. So we shouldn't be going around saying this and this person is a Babylonian in the church. That's not our job. But the sad news is that the king of the north will try to destroy even God's people. Yes. And he will infiltrate them. He will. He will be in the church. And I don't know who he is. But my job is to preach the truth. So let's have a look at the themes. Now, when it comes to this issue of the king of the north, there's a much longer lecture that I have given in the past. Perhaps you can put a link into the story. Yeah. So this slide comes from that lecture. We're not going to deal with all the details in that lecture. We want to see where we are in the stream of time today. Yes. We're working towards it, so please be patient. We have to set the biblical background here. So the three themes of chapter 11 are the following. There's a conflict described between north and south. We have to find that conflict in a modern context.
Yes.
But then there's another very strange thing that happens. There's alliance between the north and the south.
Yes.
So although they are in conflict, there's an alliance. And there's a third point. There's a conflict with the people of God. So first there is this major conflict between north and south, which develops into an alliance between the north and the south, which develops into the persecution of God's people. You know what? This sounds like a Hegelian dialectic. So you have a thesis,
yes,
and you have an antithesis, and you have a synthesis, and then you have a conflict with God's people. Verses 5 to 39 describe this Hegelian sparring between the two philosophical systems which have one collective aim, both of them, the destruction of God's people and the obliteration of true worship. So the chapter is basically written as a merism. Now, a merism is when you are contrasting opposites. Heaven and earth. That's a merism. North and south. They seem to be diametrically opposed. But a merism takes the two extremes and incorporates everything in between.
Okay.
So in other words, the whole system has one final aim. The destruction of God's people. And the destruction of the truth. That's the aim of the story. So now we have to analyze it. There's a fascinating verse in Daniel 11, verse 27. And both these kings, that's the king of the north and the king of the south. So that's the religio-political system and the secular political system. The one saying, God must be involved, and the other one saying, who's God? I'm not interested in God.
Yes.
And both of these two mindsets, as it were, will do mischief and shall speak lies at one table. What does that sound like?
That sounds like a conspiracy.
That's a terrible word. But it shall not prosper, for yet the end shall be at the time appointed. So in other words, even though these two will form a synthesis, speak lies, both of them, be mischievous, and actually be sitting at one table, although they appear to be opposites, even willing to kill each other. Now, which organization in the world has a philosophy which says that they will choose opposite sides of an issue, even to the point of death, in order that Mother Church may be the victor in the end? Which organization has that philosophy?
The Society of Jesus, the Jesuits.
The Jesuits, absolutely. So, what are the actions of the King of the North? Daniel 11 verse 32. And such as do wickedly against the covenant. Covenant is?
The Ten Commandments.
The commandments, God's word, the Bible, that's a covenant, right? Between man and God, the whole package. And such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt with flatteries. But the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits. In other words, they will work even under those conditions. And they that understand amongst the people shall instruct many. Yet they shall fall by the sword and by flame, by captivity, by spoil, many days. That's the sad history of the Christian church. So we are constantly being rubbed up, but this will reach a climax at the end. And the conflict is against God's people.
Yes.
Now, this little slide is quite fascinating. Noah was a conspiracy theorist, and then it started to rain. I find it interesting that whenever you speak about prophecy in the context of the time that we are living in, there are these voices that go up that shout, conspiracy theory. Now, is it a conspiracy theory when the Bible actually says that they're conspiring and sitting at one table and talking, or is it just a biblical fact?
It's a biblical fact. I was sitting and wondering a while back, the words conspiracy theory, if it wasn't also thought up by the Jesuits to...
There is talk that it was the Jesuits. Some say it was the Secret Service of the United States with regard to the Kennedy issue.
Yeah, because as soon as you have those words, there's the emphasis of what's being said is watered down immediately.
Yeah, it's downplayed. What is the opposite of a conspiracy theorist? Well, there's a nice phrase that they've coined. The opposite would be a coincidence apologist or a coincidence theorist. In other words, there is no conspiracy. There is no plan. Everything happens just by coincidence.
Yes.
It just so happens. There is no enemy of God. We are misinterpreting the Bible. The papacy is not a problem. The little horn is not Rome. None of these issues are important. So if you are not a conspiracy theorist in regards to biblical prophecy, you become a coincidence apologist. Then you might as well throw the Bible away. You might as well not study prophecy because everything is haphazard. What's the point of predicting the future if everything's going to be a coincidence? So to our coincidence apologists amongst us, I would say, study your Bibles and become conspiracy theorists in a prophetic sense, not in a wild sense of anything goes and every nonsense is acceptable. Apply the filter, which is the Word of God. And that is what we will try and do in this little talk. Verse 36, and the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god. Doesn't Paul speak with a similar voice in Thessalonians when he talks about this king that will set himself up in the temple of God, in the church of God, saying that he is God? Same language. Mm-hmm. So this king of the north, and he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god. We've looked at that in the doctrine of the serpent. And shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods. I know the Bible says it, but we don't teach that. We teach what the serpent taught. Amazing. And then the sad words, he shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished. For that is determined shall be done. He will come to his end.
Yes.
And anybody who's associated with him will come to their end too. The only solution is to separate yourself from the system. Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any God, for he shall magnify himself above them all. So he will not regard the God of his fathers. He says he's a Christian organization, but he doesn't do what God says. He does what the serpent says.
Yes.
He will not regard the desire of women. Now, women, of course, is a reference to churches. In the Bible, a woman is a church. And the desire of the churches of the world?
It's Jesus.
Jesus Christ. The desire of ages. So he will not regard the God of the Bible, and he will minimize Jesus Christ. There is no atonement. Well, why did Jesus die? An act of futility. It's no different to us. We also die, right? And he shall magnify himself above all. He's the way to salvation, not Jesus Christ. Come to me and I will give you rest, not Jesus. Don't go to him. Or come to Mary or whatever, but just don't go to Jesus. But in his estate shall he honor the God of forces. Now the God of forces was the God of war, yes. The God of Nimrod, that was the God of war. It
Mars.
Was Lucifer, Mars. And a God whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold and silver and precious stones and pleasant things. Just walk into a cathedral and you'll see this. And thus shall he do in the most strongholds with a strange God. It is such a sad statement that even though he worships the doctrine of the serpent and acknowledges his authority, he's so successful with this strange God.
Yes.
Whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory, and shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for gain. Who divided up this world into its little quarters? Wasn't it Rome?
Yes.
Didn't he say, my dear child, Portugal, I will draw a line through South America, and this portion we'll give to you, Brazil. And this portion over here we'll give to my dear child of Spain. And so the world is divided up and the maps are drawn. It's Rome where these decisions were made. So in summary, both the kings of the north and the south are enemies of God. They have one aim, the destruction of God's people. So we must conclude that both must be under the control of the arch-deceiver. But they're fighting each other, employing a Hegelian dialectic to induce a collective mindset conducive to his schemes. So we have thesis, antithesis, a massive clash,
yes.
Huge destruction, and the end thereof is a synthesis which then is directed against God's people.
Correct. And meaning the God's people, the commandment-keeping people
commandments
of
of
God.
Absolutely. So typologically, the king of the north must represent the religio-political alliance that would attempt to force God's people to worship according to its dictates, as Babylon tried to force the Hebrews to worship according to its dictates. And you can read the rest of Daniel, where they had to bow down to the image and they refused and they were thrown into the furnace. In other words, persecution if you don't go along with their religious way of thinking.
Yes.
And it must be church and state combined. So the king of the south, which is geographically Egypt, enslaved the people of God. That's interesting. They refused to acknowledge Yahweh, or the right of the Hebrews to worship him according to their conscience. But they did not force them to worship the Egyptian deities. So what do we have here? So we have secularism.
Yes.
Secularism which says, don't care about Yahweh, and you can do whatever you like, but you will not worship according to your way, you will be slaves. And Pharaoh said, you shall not Shabbat, you shall not rest on the seventh day. That's what he said. You shall not Shabbat, you shall work on that day. So the motives of the king of the south were the secular, whereas the motives of the king of the north were religious. Now which one is going to eventually win out?
The king of the north.
The king of the north. Now that we've given the biblical background, in other words, we have applied the filter so that we cannot be accused of being conspiracy theorists, then we will look at the signs of the end, and then we will tie it into the events that are happening in the world today to see if the filter is giving us a correct analysis of what is happening. So let's just recap some of the things that will happen at the end. Remember, Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives and they came to him and they wanted to know the signs of his coming and of the end of the world.
Yes.
And he answered them and he said, take heed that no man deceive you. Deception was going to be the one thing. Now, didn't these two kings sit at one table?
Yes.
And told lies?
Yes.
What is that?
Deception.
Deception. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. In other words, they will take the emphasis away from the real coming of Christ and put something else in its place. And you shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. Now, the king of the north, did he come with chariots and horses
Yes.
and a whirlwind, which are all symbols of war, right?
Yes.
And we're dealing with the end now. See that you be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. What must still take place? The synthesis.
Yes.
And then the conflict with God's people. Now, what will be the components? Nation shall rise against nation. Now, if you look that up, it'll say ethnos against ethnos. And if you look up in the Strong's Concordance, it'll say one of the issues will be race. There will be racial tension. Can we expect racial tension at the end?
Definitely.
How do we deal with it, right? Kingdom against kingdom. Now you're dealing with political entities. So we'll have political entities fighting against each other. We'll have racial issues fighting against each other. There will be famines and pestilences and earthquakes. Besides all this, you have all the natural disasters. So we will have COVID-19s and earthquakes and all of those issues. But nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom. Now, in the context of a battle between North and South, a real battle, which is actually being decided at one table, and people are being fed lies. So now here's my question. Whose side do I choose? Do I choose the side of the king of the north, because at least he's making religious noises?
And it sounds biblical and moral and correct.
Or do I choose the side of secularism and say, you know what, they have a point, church and state should be totally separate, this and that and the other. And which side do I choose when it comes to racial tension? Which side do I choose when it comes to dealing with pestilences and how to deal with all of those? Isn't it the king of the north and the king of the south doing both of these things and all of these things?
Sitting at one table.
Sitting at one table.
So you don't choose a side.
You cannot choose a side. All these are the beginning of sorrows. And once this conflict has brought about synthesis, then they shall deliver you up to be afflicted, and they shall kill you, and you shall be hated of how many nations?
All nations.
All nations for my name's sake. Once they reach synthesis, God's people will be a thorn in their flesh. We have to look at this.
Yes.
And now we will go into the situations that we have in the world today, and we'll ask ourselves, how far down the line are we? Where are we in the stream of time?
Yes, this is a good background information set that you've just given us.
I hope so.
So that when we look at everything that's happening, and even not even the ones that we're going to show, if you continue to watch what's happening around, then you have the filter of how to look at these things now.
And then you cannot be a conspiracist, because the filter is the Word of God.
Yes.
And the Word of God tells us which way the wind is going to blow.
Yes.
And who the role players are going to be.
Yes. And you can, the whole time, get an eagle's view of this whole situation and not become part of one of the sides.
Aha! So you're actually an observer, and you know that all of these systems will eventually be in the pocket called Babylon.
Yes.
Because the king of the north is going to control it all, right?
Yes.
And therefore you cannot choose any of these sides. No. You have to say to the people, when you are going into that particular direction, this is where it's heading. Mm-hmm. When you're going into that particular direction, which looks exactly the opposite, like north versus south.
And it doesn't matter how correct it looks to you. You must know through what you've just seen now. Stand back and look at this thing, what's going on.
And you must recognize them both as being part of the Babylonian system.
Yes.
And what is the message? Come out.
Get them out of there.
Come out of that. Come out of that. In other words, don't take part in that. Don't take part in that. Do not take part in this. Mm-hmm. Even though you think that, wow, this is a wonderful thing.
Yes.
You're being lied to.
Yes.
You're being deceived.
Doesn't matter how morally correct it seems.
There's only one way. Separate yourselves from all of these systems.
Yes.
It says further, then shall many be offended and shall betray one another and shall hate one another. Now that's a very sad statement, because that's going to happen across the board. There will be betrayals on every front, even within our own ranks.
Yes.
Many false prophets shall arise. They shall deceive many. In other words, the preachers and the churches will be preaching, and Babylonian power will be brought to bear on the situation. Iniquity shall abound. We know that iniquity is abounding in the world today. The love of many shall wax cold, and he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. And the gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. Now, there are people that are saying, oh, the end cannot be yet because all of these nations must be reached. Aren't they all watching the events of the world? Mm-hmm. Aren't they all tuned in? Don't they get the exact same news that we get worldwide? Now, the gospel of the kingdom, the truth of the kingdom, those who have a covenant with God, when this message becomes prominent as opposed to what the rest is preaching, will the nations not see it on the news? Mm-hmm. Will they not be seeing that there is a witness and all nations will see it? So we do not have to have millions of years or thousands or
Hundreds
tens.
even, or tens.
Exactly. And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which stands for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. What can we expect?
A time of trouble such as the world has never seen.
Does that include the First and the Second World War?
Yes,
Can it be worse than that?
it's going to be.
It's going to be worse.
Worse
What
than
about
everything.
What about the Black Plague?
Yes.
It's going to be worse than that. So we're going to have pestilences. We're going to have earthquakes. We're going to have wars. We're going to have a time of trouble amongst nations and peoples, internally, externally, kingdom against kingdom. We're going to have trouble such as you cannot believe.
Mm-hmm.
But God's people will then be delivered. Matthew 24 verse 22, and except those days be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. Now I know that refers to the 1,260 day period, but also to the time of the end. For the elect's sake, the days will be shortened. The last events will be rapid ones. Here's an interesting quote from the Great Controversy to set the tone for our discussion on the historic events that are taking place right now. But as the church approaches her final deliverance, Satan is to work with greater power. He comes down having great wrath because he knows that he has but a short time. Revelation 12:12. He will work with all power and signs and lying wonders for 6,000 years. That mastermind that once was highest amongst the angels of God has been wholly bent to the work of deception and ruin. So the king of the north, king of the south conflict is also a deception.
Mm-hmm.
They're both under his control, right?
Yes.
So he feels absolutely nothing for even destroying his own people if the end product can just benefit his cause.
Yes. The end justifies the means.
Whose statement is that? Isn't that the statement of the Jesuits?
Exactly.
And all the depth of satanic skill and subtlety acquired, all the cruelty developed during these struggles of the ages will be brought to bear against God's people in the final conflict. Is this in harmony with Daniel 11?
Yes.
Absolutely. And in this time of peril, the followers of Christ are to bear to the world the warning of the Lord's second advent. The tidings from the east. And the people are to be prepared to stand before him at his coming without spot and blameless. They need the righteousness of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
This is amazing. This is beautiful.
Yes.
So not the religion of Cain, not the religion of the serpent, the religion of the Bible. At this time, the special endowment of divine grace and power is not less needful to the church than in apostolic days. This is the loud cry. Mm-hmm. This is the latter rain. In a time of peril. Now, we're sitting under lockdown at the moment. But this lockdown is constantly on the move. It is growing. And there are tensions developing in the world that we need to look at. The days in which we live are solemn and important. The Spirit of God is gradually but surely being withdrawn from the earth. Plagues and judgments are already falling upon the despisers of the grace of God. There will be calamities by sea, unsettled state of society. Do we see that?
Oh, definitely.
Alarms of war are portentous. We must look at that. They forecast approaching events of the greatest magnitude. Can we expect war?
Definitely.
The agencies of evil are combining their forces and consolidating. So first we have to have this conflict between north and south, which is planned, which will be with destruction, unbelievable destruction, planned at one table, lying to the world. They are strengthening for the last great crisis. Great changes are soon to take place in our world, and the final movements will be rapid ones. This is where we are in the stream of time. Shall we look at it?
Yes.
Is it a conspiracy theory?
If you put it through the Bible and it fits, no.
Noah was a conspiracy theorist, then it started to rain. So if we say the conspiracy theory, which we are proposing, is that there will be a time of trouble such as never was. And that in the midst of this time of trouble, the message must go out. That Christ is coming again, and that we need to be covered by His righteousness. In other words, He was the one who said, I've not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. God's people must go back to God's commandments and not the world's commandments. So we're not talking conspiracy theories, we're talking biblical prophecy.
Yes.
And you shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. The persecution must still come, right?
Yes.
The time is near when large cities will be swept away. Now people will say you are fear-mongering. Am I fear-mongering, or is the Bible warning us of these things?
The Bible is warning us.
So do we need to bring across the urgency of the matter? And if we show in history as it unfolds that these things are happening, isn't that doing our duty?
Correct.
So we must beware not to be coincidence apologists. And all should be warned of these coming judgments. It's our duty. Oh, that God's people had a sense of the impending destruction of thousands of cities, now almost given to idolatry. That's not talking about the First World War.
No.
That's not talking about the Second World War. There were cities that were destroyed in that war, but it wasn't thousands of cities. How can thousands of cities be destroyed? By natural disasters?
Yes.
But what about war? Isn't
Big
that a
war.
possible? Big war. A view of the great destruction. Last Friday morning, just before I awoke, a very impressive scene was presented before me. I seemed to awake from sleep, but was not in my home. From the windows I could behold a terrible conflagration. Great balls of fire were falling upon our houses, and from these balls fiery arrows were flying in every direction. It was impossible to check the fires that were kindled, and many places were being destroyed. The terror of the people was indescribable. I think we can expect fire from heaven. What do you think?
Yes. It can.
So what could make great balls of fire go in every direction? Explosions, right?
Yes.
Now, this was written in a time when there were no aeroplanes yet flying around. There were no bombers. There were no bombs or rockets that could come bearing down on a city. This is the description of a modern war,
Yes.
of a modern situation. Could be natural, like a meteor shower or something. Could also be fake. But this sounds very real indeed. So let us have a look at the possibility that we are on the verge of these events. Because that would tell us where we are.
Let's look what's happening in the world. Let's look at the signs and see if what we've just gone through is applicable.
Is there talk of war? Now let's have a look at a few newspaper reports. The Express. This comes from May 28, 2020. World War III fears erupt after satellite footage shows 5,000 Chinese troops mobilized for conflict. Fears of all-out global war have been raised this week after shocking satellite footage revealed that China was mobilizing its armed forces with more than 5,000 troops ready for combat. This was talking about the conflict between China and India. And they've been quite harsh there, even killing each other with barbed wire poles.
Yes.
And rather gruesome. Here's another article from June 2020. World War III mapped the 6 places where World War III could break out in 2020. World War III fears were ignited across the globe just a few days into 2020, and now they have been sparked again. But which 5 places around the globe are the most likely to be starting points for World War III? So they mention the US and Iran, Iran and Israel, the US and Turkey, Kashmir, US North Korea, US and China. It's interesting that the nuclear facilities in Iran have recently had serious fires, and there was talk of maybe it was sabotage, maybe it was a movement by Israel or whatever. But the big conflict seems to be developing in the South China Sea.
Yes.
Yeah, the Express says, World War III alert as expert reveals most dangerous threat to the United States and China. China-US rivalry in the South China Sea is escalating due to the buildup of naval maneuvers where vessels from both sides are sailing dangerously close to each other, increasing the risk of military clash. So there are tensions developing in the world.
Strong tensions.
Is this just saber rattling, or is there something more associated with this? Here's the republicworld.com. China warns US against intermediate range missile deployment at Japan's military base. So the conflict is not just between the US and China. Japan is involved. India is involved. The Philippines are involved. There are many nations that are involved. Taiwan is a very central part of this. Hong Kong riots. Wu said that if the United States insists on deploying missiles at its military base in Japan, it will be provoking China to take necessary measures to resolutely fight back. He also suggested Japan and other relevant countries proceed cautiously from the perspective of regional peace and stability and not fall victim to the geopolitical plot of the United States. Meanwhile, the US has been challenging Beijing's claims on the South China Sea and helping Taiwan militarily to boost its defense inventory. And last month, Taiwan revealed that it is planning to buy Harpoon anti-ship missiles from the United States. So there's an escalation taking place there.
Yes.
Now, the king of the north and the king of the south, China, what kind of government is that?
Secular.
It's a secular government,
no God.
Communist. God is out of it. So is this king of the south or king of the north?
South.
So that's king of the south. Donald Trump, who put him in position according to him? God put him in that position. His party says that he's chosen by God, right? So who's he representing?
King of the north.
King of the north. And the king of the north, as we know, is Babylon. So that's the papacy sitting behind there. Do we have Jesuits working on that side?
Yes.
Do we have Jesuits working on the other side?
Yes. There.
Didn't Tamburini, the Jesuit general, say that from this window I control not only Europe but China? And didn't the papacy recently praise China for its social doctrine?
Yes.
So, are they playing both sides of the story?
Sitting at one table.
You think so? Interesting. Japan could carry the day in a US-China conflict. So is Japan becoming involved? As the US ramps up COVID-19 inspired threats against China and fears of a possible armed conflict mount, many strategic analysts have speculated that the Asia-Pacific strategic balance may have shifted in favor of China in sight of its fast-rising military might and capabilities. New spending will also go towards deploying Japan's first real aircraft carrier since World War II. Actually, they're not even allowed to build these things,
Correct. Right? Under the treaty,
yes.
They're not allowed to do it.
But they're doing it. As well as enhancing its space security. I find that interesting. Including through research into using electronic waves to disrupt what the budget terms enemy communication systems, likely meaning China's. Some observers believe that the Japanese Navy is now as capable and possibly superior to any force in the Pacific, including China. So this is happening behind the scenes, quietly, while nobody noticed.
The world is engulfed in the pandemic at this stage while this is happening.
While this is happening. And Japan is preparing for a military conflict. Japan's building aircraft carriers. China's thinking about sinking them. Is this conflict?
Definitely.
Now, Japan is an ally of the United
US,
States.
And they've got an agreement as well that we'll see that if Japan, for instance, if any country
attacks
them, the US is obliged to help.
So they are in an alliance with the King of the North, right? So the Japanese Navy's first aircraft carrier in 75 years is almost ready to deploy. Why are they building these things all of a sudden? Are they just little deterrents, or are they planning something? The Chinese military has already considered how it might sink the Japanese carriers. This comes from Forbes, June 26, 2020. Of course, the Japanese fleet is hardly defenseless. Japan deploys more destroyers equipped with the latest Aegis air defense system than any other country except the United States.
And those two are together.
And they're together in this. So here you can see the ships that are sailing the South China Sea. Why this Japan-China island dispute could be Asia's next military flashpoint. So there's a lot of military exercise going on. And China is taking one island after the other. Don't they know that that would lead to conflict?
They have an agreement that they would not do it.
Yes.
They still do it, so that's blatant.
So are they sitting at one table and planning this and telling us a different story? Is it possible according to the scripture, or are we now in conspiracy theories? So, for the first time in 6 years, 2 US Navy aircraft carriers are in the South China Sea. The latest show of military might from Washington as it pushes back against China's sweeping claim to much of the contested region. Now, I find it interesting that China did some saber rattling and said, oh, we can destroy those aircraft carriers because we have the missiles to do it. And the United States ignored them and sailed right through with the Nimitz and the Ronald Reagan. So there is a show of force.
Definitely.
Now, you have a little video that tells us a little bit more as to what is happening about these wars and rumors of wars.
Yes, CNN report.
A CNN report. Let's have a look.
Touting what it is calling a success in containing the novel coronavirus outbreak, China is now shifting its focus to military preparedness, making what some U.S. military experts perceive to be power moves on multiple fronts. China is flexing its military muscle, trialing its new aircraft carrier at sea a few weeks ago, and last year parading some of its latest missile technology through Beijing. President Xi Jinping addressed China's National People's Congress last month, saying China should comprehensively strengthen the training of troops and combat preparedness. In recent weeks, Chinese troops were sent to China's border with India, the two countries disputing territorial claims. Government-controlled media releasing these images of China's military in action. And last year, Chinese paramilitary troops mobilizing to the border with Hong Kong. But among the areas most concerning for the U.S. and its allies, the South China Sea. China claims these waters as sovereign territory within a designated boundary, which an international tribunal has dismissed as without legal basis. Nevertheless, China's built up its naval presence here. It's constructed islands where recent satellite images appear to show more permanent military bases. Some Southeast Asian nations have alleged China has even harassed foreign vessels carrying out oil exploration and fishing. To counter the Chinese claims, the U.S. Navy has conducted multiple freedom of navigation exercises in the sea in recent months, as well as sailing through the Taiwan Strait. Wu Shitun says those exercises show it is the U.S. provoking China. Wu suggests that while China has no desire for conflict, the Chinese will protect its sovereignty at all cost.
China has also unlawfully claimed territory in the Pacific Ocean, threatening freedom of navigation and international trade.
Experts are now calling for a channel for negotiations to ease the tensions between the two sides. But that seems increasingly unlikely. A complete severing could set the two world powers on a collision course at sea.
So that was an interesting little summary by CNN. And by the way, whose side are they on?
Who? CNN?
Yes.
King of the South.
The King of the South. It's we must start understanding.
This is how you should look at everything.
Yes. India-China skirmish in Galwan prompts fears of conflict, report. So this one has escalated to the loss of human life already.
Yes, and now it's even worse.
They're talking about two nuclear powers here that are ready to strike at each other. And then, of course, there's also the conflict between India and Pakistan about Kashmir. So there are lots of areas here where there is potential for rumors of war.
Yes.
And then you have this massive parade, which comes from Deutsche Wirtschaftsnachrichten, which means German economic news, where it says that the Russians held the greatest military parade ever since their victory over Germany. So the Russians are showing their military strength all over the world. The USA and Turkey are starting to talk about creating a unity area in Kurdistan. So that will create further conflicts with Russia, for example, who stands on the other side of this issue. And then this fascinating story about space war. Japan becomes the latest country that's preparing to fight World War III in space. Now, Donald Trump started the Space Force, as you will know. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has announced plans to form a defense unit designed to wage war in space. The Space Domain Mission Unit will launch in April as part of Japan's Air Self-Defense Force. So whatever technology they're going to use there, that is fascinating. A number of nations are now developing space weapons, with concerns growing that China and Russia are seeking ways to interfere and disable or destroy spacecraft. So there is a mass of information out there regarding a coming conflict. Here's the Metro, and it says the UK needs to build a space force to get ready to fight terrorists and wage war in the heavens. I find this interesting.
Very.
You know, if you really want to become a conspiracist, you could say, are they even planning to war against Christ when he's coming? But let us not go there. Industry leaders have warned in the future terrorists and nation states will be able to wreak economic havoc by targeting communication satellites. The incoming president of the UK space, Will Whitehorn, has said, we will see and should see the creation of a space force in the UK to help protect the nation against these threats. We are about to go through an industrial revolution in space. It's interesting that the world is preparing for a space war, and we are preaching an invasion from outside of this world that will put an end to this world's kingdoms. So does Russia have a space force? Well, let's have a look. Roscosmos is a state corporation that was established in August 2015 to oversee and implement a comprehensive reform of the Russian space industry. So we're all going into preparing for a space war. Op-ed, India needs its own space force. So all the nations are suddenly jumping onto this bandwagon. India is setting up a military space agency called the Defence Space Agency that's expected to command of all the space assets of the India's Navy and Air Force. The idea of DSA was mooted a few years back, possibly with a view to make an incremental increase in the space-related defense infrastructure. The United States, of course, with its Space Force, interesting logo that they have over there.
Yes.
So the mission is a military service that organizes, trains, and equips space forces in order to protect US and allied interests in space and to provide space capabilities to the joint force. So Japan and the United States are...
They're allies, and they've got their own.
And they have their own. So are there talks about wars and rumors of wars?
Not even only on Earth. Now it's in space as well.
Even in space. China wants to dominate space, and the US must take countermeasures, Defense News. And we can see that all of this is very recent stuff.
Like you said earlier, September last year, Trump gave the go-ahead for the Space Force, and I think it was something like $15 billion that's allocated to setting up the Space Force. I think they've even got a series, a spoof series going on about it on Netflix. So
absolutely. So the world is being prepared. And Netflix, of course, is Jesuit theater to prepare the mindset of the people for what is coming.
And we're not promoting anybody watching it, but it's interesting that one of the creators of this was creator of Simpsons.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Very interesting.
Well, I'm glad we've got the finger on the pulse there. So China is preparing for its next launch, and it's scheduled for this month, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there are interesting things happening. Now, I found it interesting. I read that Australia is wanting to introduce longer-range missiles because they see China as a threat from the north. And for the first time, they used the words rogue nation. Mm-hmm. And they were referring to the situation in the time of Adolf Hitler, with the rise of the Nazi regime in Europe. And they said, the steps that were taken were so late, and that's why it was such a major conflict. The world should have been proactive. And so they're talking about China as this next rogue nation. Now, just to sum up,
yes,
we said that there is a war between North and South. between one mindset and another mindset. Question: do we have a war unfolding within the borders of the United States of America, where you have this communist mindset being in juxtaposition with the evangelical religio mindset? Do we have that war developing in the United States?
Yes.
Is it acrimonious?
Yes, it is at a very touching point.
It's at flashpoint, right? So we have this clash between North philosophy and South philosophy within the nations.
Yes.
And the United States is just symbolic of the other nations as well. We have the same clash in every nation.
Definitely.
In Europe, in Africa, the same mindset clash is taking place. Good, so we have it in every nation, the North-South conflict. Do we have it on a national level, on a kingdom against kingdom level?
Yes.
Yes, we've just seen this. We've seen Japan, we've seen Australia, we've seen India, we've seen China, we've seen the United States, we've seen the UK, we've seen Russia. They're all preparing for a conflict. They're building up towards a conflict. Rogue state. What philosophy must be overrun?
The secular, the king of the South philosophy.
The king of the South philosophy mindset must be overrun. It is so powerfully entrenched in communism in China at the moment that it will take a major event to break that power.
Yes.
Now, we've applied the filter. We've looked at the situation. We can see we're sitting on a powder keg. How many cities will be destroyed?
Thousands.
Thousands. Are we on the verge of a great conflict on this planet? Now, I'm not saying it will happen, but I'm saying it's pretty biblical that it should happen. And we will see where this leads to. I think we must discuss the other issues of what will be the synthesis. How will it come about that there will be a synthesis at the end of this great conflict between the king of the north and the king of the south, so that we can get to the point where the final target can be addressed, which is God's people.
Commandment-keeping people.
So I think we'll discuss that in another episode.
Yes. It was a nice discussion. Until next time, let's have a word of prayer.
Pray for us.
Our Heavenly Father, thank you so much for giving us such information through your word and through the spirit of prophecy, that we can look at the world and see the things happening and put it through the filter that you've provided. We ask that you bless us until we meet again, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you for watching this video. To subscribe, click here. When the bell appears, click again to get notifications. To watch the next video, click here. Thank you.